Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Palesandro. I'm here with Aldo Lazzuco and Alessandro Olivero. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
So today we will talk about Lico, and we will show you a very short demo about what Lico can do with microservice applications. So the idea is basically to show you how you can easily run an application in Lico. So to do so, we have two clusters here, the first and the second one here, and we also will use those terminals to issue commands on them. So let's start by explaining a bit what we installed on those clusters. We have Lico installed on both of them. We installed that before in order to save time. And I think the first thing that we can have to start is to activate the peering between those clusters. So the peering is an interconnection done by Lico of cluster 1 with cluster 2. It is an administrative interconnection that negotiate all the information about resource sharing between the clusters and the network interconnectivity. So to enable that, you just have to type in the second cluster licoctl generated command. This will create give you another command, licoctl at cluster, filled with all the information about cluster 2 that you can use to pair with it. So you just have to go on cluster 1 and use them. And now we trigger the peering, which is fine. We have a new pod here, which is a virtual kubelet. This virtual kubelet is in charge of managing a new node here called Lico, and the UID of the remote cluster, and the remote cluster is obviously cluster 2. And so this is an handler to remote cluster resources, to cluster 2 resources. What we can know about this node is that the node is a virtual node, so it has a label called virtual node to identify it, and it has and its size is a percentage of the original cluster 2. So this percentage can be configured, and you can decide to have, I don't know, 50% of the cluster or less, in order to let cluster 1 use only a certain amount of resources there. So now we can, I think we can start deploying an application and see how it works. So first of all, we have to create a dedicated namespace, LicoDemo, and we will attach to that namespace a label called LicoIO enable true. This label tells Lico that this namespace has to be considered by him. And if we look to the other cluster, we see that the effect of this label is to create a twin namespace on that cluster. So the LicoDemo and the UID is connected and related to this LicoDemo. So it's a twin for LicoDemo, and we'll have all the pods that we will offload on cluster 2. Okay, nice. So what we can do now is to have a look to the application we would like to use. The application is a online boutique application from Google. We didn't change the image that you will use. We just changed one simple thing. So you can act perfect. So the recommendation service, for example, which is a part of the application, we have the exact same image that we have on Google. So the original version, we didn't change the application. We just changed the affinity part in the deployment. And this is due to the fact that we wanted to deploy half the application on one cluster and the other half on the other one. And the reason is that we want to show you that the application can work across 2 clusters. So it's not really useful maybe in reality, but it can show you how Lico does work. So let's go ahead and apply this YAML file, which is as we saw, just plain deployments, plain Kubernetes objects, and we see that in reality we have this split of the application. So the scheduler now Kubernetes scheduler considers this node, and it considers without modification. So it's the vanilla Kubernetes scheduler, and it puts half of the application on the remote cluster, so on the virtual node, and half on the local cluster. Pretty simple. The important point here is also that you can observe that a microservice application in Kubernetes normally rely on communication using services. So this application, so the YAML file we provided does not only specify deployments, but also services. I don't know, yeah, so if you can show one service.
The deployment, I think they are at the beginning.
So those services are used by exactly, for example, the Redis cart here. It's used to, for example, by the cart service to store the cart items in a database. So it's a really simple service, and we have plenty of them if we look to the cluster. So let's have a look to that. So we see that we have all those services in the demo, in the Lico demo namespace. And if we look to the twin namespace, we have exactly the same service. So this replication is done by Lico that recreates the namespace on the other side. Sorry, the service is on the other side. And also takes care of the endpoints license. So as you know, when we have a service, you normally have pods that are used to, so the traffic goes to a service and then it is redirected to one pod. So those pods are normally called endpoints. And in the latest versions of Kubernetes, they are stored in a resource we call endpoint slices. And Lico takes care of the endpoint slices in order to have all the pods on all the cluster that compose the application to be listed here and to be reachable here. And so what we have, for example, is that we have some endpoints which are local because they have an address 10.200 and something. And we have also endpoints from the other cluster, which are 10.202 and so on. So Lico takes care of having all the endpoints there, and so the application can work even if not all the pods are known by the cluster 2. So if we have a look to the node port service of the frontend here, so we try to connect to localhost at that port, we can see that the application works perfectly. And yeah, we can place an order, we can use the see different items and so on, and it's pretty easy to observe. So now we have an application which works without any modification to the application into the control plane, to the Kubernetes control plane, just by installing Lico as an add-on. I think we are finished for this demo. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have questions, you can ask them in comments, and see you next time. Bye.